Hey everybody, thank you so much for clicking on this video. So I've made a number of videos just all about fixing your form and different exercises before, and I've gotten a lot of requests for overhead pressing, which makes sense. It's one of the top mobility restrictions that I see, but I honestly just never thought to make this video. Specifically today, we're gonna talk about why the overhead press is an important movement pattern. We'll break down proper form. I'll show you the most common mistakes I see and then give you exercises to improve them. But first, let's talk about why the overhead press is important. So the overhead press is a vertical push movement, meaning that we are pushing weight vertical in relation to our body. Does that make sense? The other version of a push is a horizontal push, so something like a chest press or a push-up. And the reason why this is so important is because we do it probably every single day. Putting the dishes away in the overhead cabinet, lifting up a baby, putting your luggage up overhead. If you're in Hamilton, you gotta do those like slow motion chair scene changes. You guys know what I'm talking about? So again, it's a vital movement pattern that we see all the time. So if we see it in daily life, we want to make sure that we're strong enough to protect ourselves from injury while we're doing it. And if you can't do this movement pattern, your quality of life is probably going to be affected to some point. You want to be able to put the dishes away. You want to be able to lift up your baby. You want to be able to lift up your own luggage overhead without having to ask a stranger to do it. You want to be able to do your Hamilton chair scene change. It's a very niche example right there, but I don't know. I wrote it down and I thought it was funny. But I think it's pretty clear why this movement pattern is so vital to train. So now let's break down the proper form. All right, I feel like we haven't gone like full room in a while. I'm also trying the angle. I know in all of the other videos it's been like front facing. I don't know, we're playing. We're getting creative. All right, guys, so let's talk about our overhead press. I'm just gonna show you using 2 dumbbells. If you've watched my videos or done my workouts before, you know that I do prefer a single arm overhead press, but there's so many different variations. I'm just gonna show you what I think is probably the most popular one. So racking your weights on the shoulders, let's actually just start with the rack position. This is what I see a lot of time, elbows flaring, okay? Or I'll see weights in front of the chest, or far behind, or sometimes I see people gripping their dumbbells like this, which is very interesting to me. Hold your dumbbells, wrists are straight, rest the back of them on the shoulders. From here, we're gonna make sure that the glutes are engaged, ribs are pulled down, big exhale as we press up, inhale back down. Exhale, press, inhale down from the front. One more time. And down. All right, so now that you know what the basic form looks like for a 2-arm dumbbell overhead press, let's talk about the 3 most common mistakes that I see. First is an arched back. So what I mean by this is as you're pressing up, your low back gets this excessive arch in it. This means that your core is not engaged. So what I want you to do in this situation is take a slight bend in the knees, tuck the tailbone under slightly, and then pull your ribs down. A great cue is to think like you are crushing a can of Coke between your ribs and your pelvis. That's gonna get the core engaged, that's gonna get your glutes fired, and it's gonna take the pressure off the low back. Now, a great exercise you can do to improve this is actually planks. Personally, I love a forearm plank, and I like to take this from a modified position to start, meaning that you're dropped down to the knees. The biggest things you wanna look for here is making sure your arms are parallel. We're really pinching together those mid-back muscles, and then we have a slight posterior tilt of the pelvis, just like when we were standing. Again, tuck the hips under so that we can get that core engaged. And if you wanna advance it, you can think of pinching the floor between the elbows and knees, and you can raise your knees up just an inch, and it's gonna be the hardest plank of your life. So the next most common mistake I see is that your arms are too far forward, meaning that as you're pressing up, you're actually not getting full overhead mobility. Ideally, we wanna think bicep by the ear. This gets tough for people because they either don't have the mobility in their shoulder or they have to compensate by bringing the ribs out, flaring the rib cage. So one of my favorite mobility drills to help with this are something called floor slides, or you can progress it up to wall slides. Essentially, this is going to work your strength through your overhead mobility. Remember that mobility is all about having strength in your full range of motion. The most important thing here is that you are actively pressing down your low back, your shoulder blades, your wrists, and your hands into the mat the entire time. So once you press overhead and something has to lift up, you've gone too far. Now, if you have limited overhead mobility due to an injury or for whatever reason, but you still want to work on that vertical press, I would recommend trying a landmine if you have access to it. I do not have a landmine or a video of me doing it, so I'll just like pop up someone else doing it right here. But you can see you get more of that 45-degree angle rather than the full 90 degrees up overhead. So you still get in that vertical push, even if you don't have full overhead mobility for whatever reason. The final mistake that I see is an over-elevated shoulder. And this is a little bit tricky, and we're going to talk about about this one. So when we're overhead pressing, we wanna find a nice middle ground between an elevated shoulder versus a completely depressed shoulder. Because here's the thing, if my shoulder is fully elevated, I am probably lifting up through the side of my rib cage. I'm getting more upper trap involved than I need, and you can just see like my whole, what is my body doing, right? But you see it a lot because people don't have that full mobility overhead. On the flip side, we don't want to fully depress that shoulder because what starts to happen is that we are now crushing all of this space within our thoracic spine. So instead, we want to find a nice healthy balance of incorporating, tying in the upper trap with our shoulder, with our obliques, with the lat, up overhead, with the chest, all of these muscles that you might not think actually work with an overhead press, but using all of those muscle fibers supported together to help you bring that weight overhead. Again, that's a lot more nuanced, but I think just like looking in a mirror can really help. And I always tell my clients, go to the extremes, right? Do it really wrong, and then go right in the middle. A great exercise for this is working through Scap Cars. So Scap stands for scapular or shoulders, and then Cars are controlled articular rotations. So essentially we are just taking really controlled, slow, and specific rotations in whatever joint we're talking about. Specifically here, it's the shoulder socket. By slowing down and isolating this ball and socket joint, we are really going to be able to tell the difference between when we're hyper elevating or hyper depressing. Hi. Aw, could you see my sweatshirt in the corner the whole time? God damn it. It's fine, we're not perfect. If you can see the room behind you, it is a mess. Anyway, I hope that video was helpful and not only showed you what proper form looks like, but also give you some actionable steps to improve upon mistakes that you might be doing. If there's another movement pattern that you want to see broken down, definitely let me know down in the comments below. Hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out, and I will see you all in the next one.